The check was for £17,462,318.56. I know the number by heart. It's etched into me, not as a figure of joy, but as the price tag for my old life. I held that flimsy paper in the post office, the hum of the fluorescent lights suddenly deafening, and my first thought was of my daughter, Sophia. I would buy her the world. 2 years later, on a bleak November afternoon, I sat in a coffee shop watching rain slide down the window, holding a different piece of paper. This one was a photocopy from a solicitor's office, a draft petition questioning my mental capacity, suggesting I was a vulnerable adult unable to manage my own affairs. The proposed deputy? Sophia. The steam from my latte spiraled up, merging with the fog on the glass, and in that haze, I saw it clearly. The money hadn't bought us a dream. It had financed a beautifully orchestrated betrayal. And the deepest cut was not the legal threat, but the memory of her at age 7, presenting me with a daisy chain crown whispering, "You're the queen of everything, Mummy." Now she wanted to dethrone me, and take the kingdom for herself. To understand the fracture, you must first see the picture we were. Michael, my husband, was a secondary school history teacher with a laugh that could rumble through a house. He died so suddenly, a brain aneurysm, that for years afterwards, I felt time had simply ripped, leaving a jagged edge Sophia and I were constantly snagging on. She was 10. I was 38. We became a unit of two, a small, tight planet orbiting a shared grief. I was a librarian, not by grand career design, but because I found a sanctuary in the quiet, ordered stacks of our local library. The pay was modest, but it allowed me to be home when Sophia finished school. Our life was a tapestry of small, careful pleasures. Library books spread on the living room floor, Friday night films with homemade popcorn, saving coins in a jam jar for a weekend trip to the seaside. We talked about Michael constantly, keeping him woven into our days. "Dad would love this storm," she'd say, watching rain lash the windows. He'd make hot chocolate with too many marshmallows. Sophia was creative, fiercely so. She'd fill sketchbooks with swirling dresses and elaborate shoes, dreaming of being a fashion designer. "When I'm famous in Paris, Mum, you'll live in a little apartment above my atelier, and we'll drink café au lait every morning," she'd declare, and I'd smile, my heart both bursting and breaking a little. I saw her ambition, her hunger for a bigger, brighter canvas than our gray London suburb could offer. I felt a constant low-grade guilt that I couldn't give it to her. I scrimped to pay for her art supplies, for the better college course. Our love was deep, but it existed within a frame of financial constraint. It was a love that said, "This is all I have, and it is yours." The lottery win was a bolt from the blue. I'd bought the ticket on a whim, a single lucky dip, while buying milk. It lived in my handbag for a week before I remembered to check it. The validation process was a surreal blur of phone calls, security questions, and a numbness that settled in my bones. When it was confirmed, the first thing I did was wake Sophia, who was home from university for the weekend. We sat on the edge of my bed, clutching hands, as I told her. Her reaction was pure, unadulterated joy. She leaped up, screaming, dancing, pulling me into a hug so tight I couldn't breathe. "We're free, Mum. We're finally free. Everything is going to be perfect." We cried tears of cathartic release. Years of quiet struggle seeming to melt away in those moments. We made promises, huddled together like conspirators. "We'll be smart," I said. "This changes our lives, but it doesn't change us." "Never," she vowed, her eyes gleaming with tears and excitement. "We're a team. Always." The initial phase was practical, and still felt like a shared project. With the guidance of a financial advisor, we paid off the mortgage on our semi-detached house. I bought a slightly larger, brighter house a few roads over. Not a mansion, but a home with a garden room Sophia could use as a studio, and a kitchen that didn't have damp in the corner. I set up a substantial trust fund for her, enough that, if managed wisely, would give her a lifelong safety net. I bought us a nice, reliable car. I put money away for my own future. It felt responsible, blessed. The core of our spending was on experiences. A holiday to Italy, visiting the art and architecture Sophia had pored over in books. It was magical. She called me every day from university, bubbling over with ideas. "Mum, I'm thinking of switching to this amazing course in Milan. The fees were astronomical. If it's your dream, I said, we'll make it work. But the texture of our conversations began to change, so subtly I almost missed it. The we in her sentences started to feel different. It was less we, you and I, and more we as in me and my future. Her circle of friends shifted. She spoke less of her old school friends, and more of people she'd met at exclusive events. Names that sounded like brand names themselves. Chloe, who summered in St. Tropez. Hugo, whose family owned an estate in Berkshire. Her vocabulary absorbed theirs. It's just so naff, she'd say of something I'd bought. Let's get the proper one. The proper one was always exponentially more expensive. She began to make gentle, then not so gentle, critiques of our new home. This area is just so suburban, Mum. Don't you think you'd be happier in a Chelsea townhouse? It's an investment. When I said I loved my garden and my neighbors, she'd sigh as if I were being deliberately obtuse. The guilt I'd once felt about not providing enough was now being expertly repurposed. She'd frame her desires as concerns for my status, my comfort. I just want people to see you the way I see you, Mum. You deserve the best now. It was a masterful manipulation, dressing greed in the clothing of filial devotion. I found myself agreeing to things to see that light of approval in her eyes, the light that had been absent in the hard years. I funded her move to a luxury apartment in Milan. I paid for her networking trips to Paris and New York. Each transaction felt like a brick placed in a wall between the mother who remembered instant noodles and the daughter, who now sent me photos of €100 sushi platters. Then came David. He was polished from a family with old money, as Sophia was keen to point out. He was charming in a distant way, always assessing, his smiles never quite reaching his eyes. He treated my wealth not as a surprise, but as an expected footnote to Sophia's biography. I saw the way he looked at our home, at my simple clothes, with a faint unspoken condescension. Sophia mirrored him. She started to correct my pronunciation of certain words, my choice of wine. The little planet of two was being pulled into a new, more complex and colder solar system, and I felt myself becoming a minor, slightly embarrassing moon. The wedding was the catalyst. It was to be the event of the season, Sophia declared. Not her season, the season. We were in the garden room of my house, now stacked with her art supplies and mood boards covered in fabric swatches. She had a dedicated wedding planner, a severe woman named Celeste who spoke in a whisper that commanded total attention. They presented me with a leather-bound folio. The vision, Sophia said, her face radiant. It was a spreadsheet of dreams with a bottom line that made my breath catch. The venue, a remote Scottish castle, requiring exclusive hire for a week. The guest list, 200 people, many of whom I'd never met. A celebrity florist flying in from Amsterdam. A dress from a designer whose name I recognized from red carpet events. The estimated cost was well over £500,000. Sophia, this is immense, I managed to say. Isn't it perfect? She breathed, tracing a picture of the castle turrets. It's everything I've ever wanted. It's a lot of money for one day, I said gently, the librarian in me instinctively seeking prudence. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Celeste discreetly examined her perfect nails. David, who was lounging on the sofa, didn't look up from his phone. Mum, Sophia said, her voice a careful blend of patience and hurt. This isn't just one day. It's my wedding. It's the foundation of my future with David. His family expects a certain standard. This is about securing my place. Our place. The word securing hung in the air. This wasn't about love or celebration anymore. It was a social transaction, a down payment on a lifestyle. What if we found something equally beautiful but closer? I ventured. A lovely manor house in the Cotswolds? We could still have all your family and friends. My friends are flying in from all over the world, she interrupted, her tone sharper. I can't ask them to go to the Cotswolds. Please don't be difficult. This is what the money is for. To make dreams come true. You said so yourself. She leaned forward, taking my hands in hers. They felt cool. Mum, listen. I've already been to see the castle with David and Celeste. We've put a provisional hold on the dates. They need a non-refundable deposit of £120,000 by the end of the week, or we lose it. She squeezed my hands. It's just a start. The first step. Please. Just a start. The phrase was an iceberg, and I was suddenly sensing the terrifying mass of it beneath the surface. The team was gone. I was no longer a co-dreamer. I was the financier. The bank. The quiet, reliable source of funds who was now threatening to decline the loan. I looked into her eyes that were so like Michael's, and I saw a steely determination that had nothing to do with me. I felt a fissure open up in the bedrock of our relationship, deep and silent. I nodded slowly, unable to find the words to fight the combined force of her will, David's expectation, and the ghost of my own promise to give her everything. All right, I whispered. I'll transfer the deposit. Rising pressure. The transfer of that money felt like opening a lock on a floodgate. The demands, now always framed as non-negotiable necessities, poured through with relentless force. Sophia's communication became transactional, a series of invoices masquerading as conversations. A typical text would read, "Mom, Celeste says we need to confirm the fireworks display for the lock. It's $25K. Can you sort?" XX. The XX felt like a typo, a habit she'd forgotten to omit. I tried to re-engage, to be a mother, not just a wallet. I invited her for a weekend, just the two of us, at a spa. "I'd love to, Mum," she said, "but that's the weekend we're doing the bespoke suit fittings with David's tailor in Seville Row. It's a whole thing." I offered to help with seating plans, a traditional mother of the bride task. "Oh, Celeste has a proprietary algorithm for that, based on social connections and potential networking value. It's better left to the professionals." I was being professionally managed out of my own daughter's wedding. The financial strain began to manifest in private, peculiar ways. Despite the millions in the bank, I started to feel a profound anxiety about money for the first time in 2 years. I found myself scrutinizing my own grocery bills, buying the cheaper own-brand tea again, as if some deep-seated instinct knew a famine was coming. I'd lie awake at night, not in my comfortable bed, but on the sofa downstairs, running mental calculations. The castle deposit, the dress, $80,000. The honeymoon suite for the week, $15,000 per night. The bespoke china with their new monogram. It was a torrent, and I was standing in the middle of it, getting colder and colder. My social life, never vast, withered. Old friends from the library or the neighborhood sensed a change. An unbridgeable gap they assumed was of my making. I didn't have the energy to explain that my wealth had made me lonely. I'd overhear snippets at the local shop. "Margaret doesn't have time for the likes of us anymore." Or, "That daughter of hers is living it up in Milan, I hear." The isolation was a tangible presence in the house. The most painful moments were the small betrayals of our history. For her birthday, I spent days putting together a photo album. Not a fancy one, but the kind we used to make together. Pictures of her and Michael building sandcastles, of her in her first paint-splattered smock, of us on that Italy trip, laughing with gelato. I wrapped it carefully and sent it to Milan. She called a week later. "Thanks for the album, Mum. It's sweet. It's on the coffee table." There was a pause. "Listen, David's parents are throwing us an engagement party at their club. My dress is sorted, but I need a statement necklace. There's a vintage Cartier piece at an auction. It would be such an heirloom. It's around $45,000. Can you wire it to this account?" The album wasn't mentioned again. It was as if I'd sent her a piece of evidence from a past life she was keen to archive. The incident with the vase was the final emotional straw before the legal revelation. She'd come down for a rare visit, mainly to show David some potential wedding venue near my home they were considering for a pre-wedding event. I'd bought fresh tulips, her favorite, and put them in a simple glass vase on the hall table. As they were leaving, she glanced at it. "Oh, Mum, you still have this old thing?" she said, a faint smile on her lips. "It's so clearance rack." David chuckled. That vase had been a gift from her, bought with her pocket money when she was 8. She'd carried it home so carefully, beaming with pride. "For your flowers, Mummy." Now it was clearance rack. I didn't say a word. After they left, I picked it up, felt the cool glass. I didn't throw it away. I placed it on a high shelf in my bedroom, where I could see it but she couldn't. A relic. A marker of where the shoreline used to be before the tide of money washed it all away. Then came the phone call I overheard. She'd popped upstairs to use the bathroom, leaving her phone on the kitchen counter. It buzzed with a call from David. Without thinking, I answered to tell him she'd be a moment. But before I could speak, I heard his voice, tinny through the speaker. "So, did you get the transfer for the necklace?" I froze, the phone to my ear. A beat of silence. Then Sophia's voice, slightly distant, as if she'd just re-entered the room downstairs but hadn't picked up her other phone. "Not yet. She's being slow. I think she's getting suspicious. We might need to accelerate the other thing." David's voice. "The capacity application?" Sophia. "Yes. Celeste's contact at the law firm said it's cleaner if we initiate it before the wedding. Shows we're responsible. Once I'm deputy, we can access everything directly. No more begging for deposits." David. "Just make sure you get those confusion incidents documented. The missed appointment last week, the forgetting about the caterer payment." "I'm on it. She's so trusting. It's almost sad." The line went dead as she presumably found her other phone and ended the call. I stood in my silent kitchen, the receiver still in my hand, emitting a dull dial tone. The words capacity application, deputy, begging, it's almost sad, swirled in my head like shards of glass. This was no longer about extravagant tastes or a bride's demands. This was a plotted, clinical takeover. The trust was not just broken, it had been incinerated. And in its place was a cold, terrifying clarity. Midpoint reveal. That clarity is what led me methodically to begin looking. I was no longer a hurt mother. I was a woman gathering intelligence. I started in her old room, now a glorified storage space for her more mundane belongings. I found nothing. Then I thought of the cutlery drawer. It was an odd place, but Sophia had always been one for hiding Christmas presents in plain sight. I emptied it, feeling along the lining. My fingers touched the edge of a folded A4 sheet. Then another. I pulled out a small sheaf of papers, neatly paper-clipped together. They were printouts of email correspondence. Draft letters. Notes in Sophia's handwriting. The letterhead was from a firm called Harrington and Cade, solicitors, elder law and private client. The language was dry, lethal. Phrases jumped out. Concerns regarding client's recent cognitive lapses. Apparent susceptibility to financial influencers outside the family. Client's daughter, Miss Sophia Reed, acting out of deep concern, proposes a deputyship application under the Mental Capacity Act 2005. There was a list of documented incidents. *1. Client forgot a scheduled meeting with wedding planner, causing significant contractual issues 14/10. 2. Client appeared confused about the value of her property during a conversation with an interior designer, October 22. 3. Client failed to authorize a scheduled payment to a vendor, citing non-existent memory of the agreement, May 11. Each incident was a twisted version of reality. The missed meeting was when I had a confirmed dental appointment I'd told her about months prior. The property value confusion was me politely declining a pushy designer's quote. The failed payment was for a ludicrously overpriced ice sculpture I had explicitly refused. She was constructing a narrative, brick by malicious brick, painting me as a frail, confused woman losing her grip. The final page was a bullet-pointed strategy. Phase 1, gather evidence ongoing. Phase 2, informal discussion with GP Re, concerns target, and NOV. Phase 3, file application pre-wedding, ideally Jan. Phase 4, secure assets restructure for long-term management, Sophia as sole signatory. Post-wedding liquidity event. Liquidity event. My life, my freedom, reduced to a financial term. I sat at the kitchen table, the rain still streaking the window. The shock was so complete it was almost peaceful. This was the betrayal, fully realized. It wasn't passionate or impulsive. It was a cold, corporate maneuver. My own flesh and blood was orchestrating a soft coup to legally disempower me and take control of everything Michael and I had ever built, everything the lottery had given. The love was gone. In its place was a ruthless business plan. And in that moment, the last vestige of the weeping, confused mother died. A different woman sat up straight, wiped a single, final tear from her cheek, and made a decision. I would not be a victim of this plot. I would become its unraveler. Quiet countermove/plan. My first move was one of absolute silence. I carefully refolded the papers and placed them back in their hiding spot. I needed her to believe her plan was still secret, still on track. Then I made a list. Not an emotional one, but a strategic to-do list, the kind I used to make for library fundraising events. Legal fortification. This was paramount. I could not use the family solicitor who had set up the initial trusts. He was too connected to the old family dynamic. I researched and found Aliyah Khan, a partner at a firm known for robust, no-nonsense asset protection and contested probate. At our first meeting, in her minimalist office, I placed a copy of the papers I'd found on her desk. I didn't cry. I spoke calmly, factually. Aliyah listened, her expression growing graver. "Mrs. Reed," she said finally, "this is a predatory deputyship application in the making. It's not uncommon, sadly. We need to move decisively to make you a fortress." Under her guidance, we executed a series of quiet, powerful actions. I created a new, ironclad lasting power of attorney for both property/financial affairs and health/welfare, appointing Aliyah's firm as my attorney, with a trusted old friend from the library as a named successor. This legally overrode any application Sophia might make. We updated my will that same day. The previous one had left her almost everything. The new one was a different document. It provided her with a lump sum equal to the amount I'd already gifted her for the wedding. A stark, symbolic balance. The remainder of my estate was divided between a literacy charity Michael had loved, a local art center, and a bursary for mature women students at my old college. She was named, but she was no longer the heir. It was a disinheritance by redirection. Aliyah helped me restructure my finances. We moved the majority of my liquid assets into a complex discretionary trust, of which I was the primary beneficiary, but which was administered by independent trustees. It was in financial terms a ghost. It existed, it provided for me, but it had no tangible form Sophia could lay claim to. My house was placed in a separate protective trust. To the outside world, and to Sophia, I still appeared to be a wealthy woman living in her home. In reality, my wealth was now guarded by a series of legal moats and walls. The evidence dossier. I bought a simple gray lever arch file. In it, I began a chronological record. I printed out every text message demand, every extravagant invoice she'd sent. I wrote contemporaneous notes of our conversations, quoting her words as best I could remember. I documented the incidents she was distorting with my evidence. My dental appointment card, the declined designer's quote, my email refusing the ice sculpture. I included a timeline of the major financial transfers I'd already made to her. It was a ledger, not of love, but of exploitation. Aliyah said it was golden. It proved motive. The human shield. I needed allies, not for sympathy but for witness. I confided carefully in two people. My GP, Dr. Amin, and my neighbor, Brenda, a retired nurse. I showed Dr. Amin the cognitive lapses list. He was outraged. He wrote a letter for my file, stating he had seen me regularly, had conducted routine cognitive screenings which were entirely normal, and that I was a person of sound mind making considered, if generous, financial decisions. Brenda, who had seen Sophia's comings and goings, agreed to be a character witness if needed. "That girl's always had cold eyes," she said bluntly. Money's warmed her hands, not her heart. Personal preparedness. I steeled myself emotionally. I replayed the cruel comments, the overheard conversation, the legal papers in my mind until they lost their power to shock and instead fueled my resolve. I visited Michael's grave, something I hadn't done in a while. I told him everything. "I have to fight our girl, Michael," I whispered to the headstone. "And I don't think I can win her back. I can only win myself back." The quiet in the cemetery felt like an affirmation. I also prepared my environment. I installed a discreet, high-quality audio recorder in the main living areas. I checked the legalities with Aliyah. In the UK, as a participant in the conversations, I could record them. I was not going to be ambushed again without a record. The plan was not about revenge. It was about reclamation. It was about drawing a boundary in legal concrete. The climax would come, I knew. She would eventually push for the final, catastrophic transfer, or the deputyship would be mentioned. My role was to be calm, prepared, and utterly immovable. The mother who could be guilt-tripped was gone. In her place was a woman waiting, with sad, steady eyes, for the storm she knew her daughter would bring to her door. The storm arrived on a bright, brittle Saturday in January. Sophia and David came down unannounced. Her expression was a mask of concerned solicitude, but her eyes were hard. David carried a sleek leather document folder. The wedding was 3 months away. "Mum, we need to talk," Sophia began, her voice soft. "It's important." "Of course," I said, gesturing to the sofa. "Would you like tea?" "No time," David said, sitting and placing the folder on the coffee table. "This is rather urgent." I sat opposite them, my hands folded in my lap. The recorder was on in the drawer of the side table. Sophia took a breath. "Mum, we're all worried about you." "Me, David, Celeste. We think the stress of the wedding, and the money, it's all becoming too much for you." I remained silent, letting her build her case. "You've been forgetting things," she continued, leaning forward. "Missing appointments. Getting confused about payments. Last week, you told the florist you hadn't approved the peonies, but you had. It caused a huge row." "I told the florist I hadn't approved the price of the peonies," I corrected gently. "They had doubled from the original quote." She waved a hand dismissively. "See? That's the kind of detail that gets muddled. And the house, you're not maintaining it. It's fading." She looked around my perfectly tidy, loved living room. "We think it's time we got some help. For your own good." David opened the folder. "We've taken the liberty of speaking to a specialist firm, Harrington and Cade. They handle cases like this, where older individuals need protection from making decisions they might regret." He slid a document toward me. It was a letter of engagement, and attached was the beginning of a deputyship application form. My name was already typed in. "All you need to do is sign here, Mum," Sophia said, her voice dripping with false kindness. "It just means I'll help you manage things. Pay the bills, look after the house, handle the big financial decisions. You can just relax. Enjoy your life. No more stress." I looked at the paper. I looked at her. The silence stretched. "And the wedding?" I asked. "Oh, everything's taken care of," David said smoothly. "Once this is in place, we can access the funds directly to finalize all the payments. You won't have to lift a finger." I nodded slowly. Then I stood up, walked to my desk, and picked up my own gray lever-arch file. I placed it on the coffee table with a soft, definitive thud next to their leather folder. "I've done some consulting of my own," I said, my voice even. "With Elia Khan of Knight and Crosswell." I saw a flicker of confusion, then alarm, in Sophia's eyes. She knew the firm's reputation. I opened my file. "This is a record," I began, "of every financial demand you have made of me since the win. The total to date is £1,847,000. I let that number hang. David's jaw tightened. "This," I continued, tapping a section, "is a contemporaneous log of our conversations, including your suggestion that your father would have wanted a castle, and your comment about my vase being clearance rack. This is a letter from my GP, Dr. Amin, stating I am in full possession of my mental faculties. He was particularly interested in your list of my cognitive lapses, which he has refuted point by point." Sophia's face was pale. "You've been spying on me?" "I've been documenting our relationship," I said, "since it became a financial negotiation." I then picked up their engagement letter. "As for this, it's too late. I have already executed a lasting power of attorney, appointing professionals. Any application you make will be contested vigorously, with this dossier as evidence of your undue influence and financial coercion." The mask shattered. "You can't do this," Sophia shrieked, standing up. "That's my money. Mine and David's. We've planned everything. The wedding, the house, our future. You're a stupid, selfish old woman trying to ruin my life." David tried to shush her, but the dam had broken. "I earned that money," I put up with your pathetic little life for years. She spat, tears of rage now streaming. Listening to your boring stories, pretending to care about your stupid library books. I deserve that money for my suffering. And you're going to give it to charity. Her words were lacerating, but they had no power over me anymore. They were just confirmation. I looked at David. I think you should both leave now. You'll hear from our solicitors, David said coldly, gathering their papers. And you, I said to Sophia, with a finality that silenced her, are uninvited from my life. The wedding funds are frozen. The transfers stop today. If you proceed with any legal action, I will release this file and the recording of this conversation to not only the courts, but to David's family, to your friends, to Celeste. Let them see the blueprint. The color drained completely from her face. The revelation of the recording was the masterstroke. It wasn't just about the law now. It was about her precious social standing. The facade would crumble. They left without another word. I watched their expensive car screech away from the curb. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a vast hollow exhaustion. And beneath it, the solid, unyielding bedrock of my own survival. The climax wasn't an explosion. It was the quiet, seismic click of a deadbolt, sliding home. Resolution and moral. The aftermath was a quiet earthquake. Sophia disinvited me from the wedding, as I knew she would. She sent a vicious, lengthy email, blaming me for her ruined life, accusing me of never loving her, of hoarding her inheritance. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Aaliyah and filed it in the gray folder. The wedding, I heard through the brittle grapevine, happened. It was at a much-reduced venue, paid for by David's family. The photos I saw online showed a beautiful, smiling bride. Her eyes, to me, looked like polished stone. I sent a wedding gift. Not the Cartier necklace, but a first edition of a book on Italian architecture she'd loved as a teenager. From a time when her dreams were about beauty, not status. No note. It was an act of grace for the ghost of the girl she was, an offering laid on a grave that my life now is different. The silence in the house is no longer lonely, it is peaceful. I volunteer at the library more days than not. I find profound joy in helping a child find the right book, in the quiet companionship of the stacks. I use the money from the trust to fund things that feel meaningful. A book start program for low-income families. A donation that saved the local community garden from closure.